coming in for an intensive, there's a whole setup for it. So I call it the sacred pause. That's the number one reason to do it, is to take a sacred pause. And I think, COVID has taught us that we can do that. We can actually slow things down and reprioritize. And so the sacred pause, we have that person actually set up their whole life around slowing it down.
In this interview with Rebecca Strong, we will talk about EMDR intensives and a very unique way to do EMDR intensives. Rebecca will share her retreat style intensive EMDR she does with her clients and how to make them more efficient. She will talk about the benefits of doing EMDR on your feet, including RDI on your feet, and other practices that help integrate her somatic practices into EMDR therapy. Rebecca is an EMDR therapist from Boulder, Colorado. She is also a yoga teacher and has background in mindfulness, meditation, and embodiment practices. She integrates nature, movement, and yoga into her therapy practice. Here's the interview with Rebecca Strong. Rebecca Strong, welcome to the Art and Science of EMDR, and thank you so much for joining me today.
It's great to be here, Rotem. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, so Rebecca, I am excited to learn about your EMDR intensive retreat. So I want to start by asking, what is an EMDR intensive, or what is an EMDR retreat?
Yeah, great question. So an EMDR intensive, I have mini intensives or micro intensives that are 2 to 3.5 hours. So the shortest would be a 2-hour, the longest would be a half day of a micro intensive. And then it moves, a mid-level would be like a day long. Usually, though, what I've been doing are 3 days back to back with clients. And then sort of the high level intensive is 10 to 15 days, and that can be clustered together or spread out over 1 to 3 months.
Wow, that's a long time of EMDR.
Yeah.
What are the benefits of doing an EMDR intensive?
Yes, excellent. One of the benefits is undivided healing attention. And when I ask people, when have you ever had a whole day of undivided healing attention? People really kind of, sort of rub their chins and look to the left and look to the right, trying to locate a time in their life when they had really, truly undivided attention where, here in the therapeutic office, I'm not moving and doing the laundry or catching a text, or it truly is a time of providing a container for another person to really focus on what are the things that keep catching you or you keep getting hooked up on that feel preventative to forward momentum. So a huge benefit is undivided attention.
Yeah, I would imagine that probably a lot of the people you ask this question say never, like never in their, at least in their adult life, right? Nobody has time to take a whole day just for themselves, for healing.
Yes.
Do you make them turn their phones off? So are they completely off of electronics?
Yes, that's such a great question. So coming in for an intensive, there's a whole setup for it. So I call it the sacred pause. That's the number one reason to do it, is to take a sacred pause. And I think, COVID has taught us that we can do that. We can actually slow things down and reprioritize. And so the sacred pause, we have that person actually set up their whole life around slowing it down, slowing things down. So I'll usually bring in the person's spouse if they have a significant other, or I'll get at least one other person in their life on board to actually help protect the time before the intensive that morning. I always have them bring lunch. So we take, usually start at 10 and end at 6. We'll take an hour break. I invite them to eat, but then also either rest or move, so they're not checking emails if they can help it. When they get home, in an ideal situation, doesn't always happen this way, but that someone else is helping to nourish them, or at least protect the space so they can nourish themselves and not sort of slip back into the everyday rational ordinary consciousness, but to actually preserve that time and create a retreat-like atmosphere for themselves.
Yeah, I love how you phrase it, protect the time.
Mm.
I often ask my EMDR clients to just take time right after the session, not to go straight to your phone and check your emails and text. And I think it's so important because the brain keeps
Yes.
processing, and
Yes.
there are benefits that people can get from protecting their time after processing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. There's new insights, right? So the brain, as you know, after 20 minutes of doing the bilateral work, the brain starts becoming more receptive to new neural pathways. So if we've worked up to 7 hours in a day, we're not going to do 7 hours of bilateral work, and the brain is more malleable, it's more receptive, new insights, new possibilities are more available, and really protecting that time is to garner that, to harvest that, and also to expand the possibility of that.
Yeah. So Rebecca, I want to ask you, so EMDR retreats is a recent growing trend in our EMDR community. And I know that some people do that. And I know of colleagues who've been doing it a few years. But I want to ask you specifically about your retreat and what makes it different than other EMDR intensives.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. I think, partly I come from a somatics background. So to be totally transparent, one of the reasons the EMDR retreat style is appealing to me is because I'm a Hakomi trained clinician as well. So if you're familiar with that style of psychotherapy, when we trained for 2 years, 1 weekend a month. We would arrive at 9 a.m., leave at 6 or 7. We worked intensively with each other all day long, and building in bio breaks and wellness breaks. So I bring that background, the somatics piece, the early childhood trauma, developmental trauma focus. But I also have training in embodied leadership. So what that means is, how do we cultivate a sense of presence through the body and keep the circulation of the body-mind connection happening throughout our work together? So I know there are a lot of clinicians who bring different body-mind tools, and that's one in particular that I love, and that just naturally flows into the work.
Right. And in a previous conversation, you shared that you have a strong background in yoga. You've been teaching yoga
Mm.
for about 2 decades. Can you talk a little bit about how you integrate yoga into your EMDR retreat?
Sure. So healing, I've always been taught, and I believe that healing takes place in the present moment, right? And the body is here, and then the mind can be elsewhere. The power of that is the power of imagination, and the detriment of that is distraction, right? So I think most of us I can spend a day not having moved and I'm not playing with my full deck, right? And so I can tell when a client comes in that they're sort of more in their head and they're not really inhabiting the fullness of their body, therefore also the fullness of their experience, and really the fullness of their potential. So yoga, different mindful movement practices, breathing, and also a lot of pushing. I do wall squats, plank, um, full planks, half planks, push, two hands pushing against the wall, things that really bring a sense of presence. We've got the Jim Knipe back of the head scale, right? So how present are you now? So if I'm working with someone and I'm sensing they're about here, or they report they're about here, I actually want them a lot closer to here before we even start working, right? So it's like, let's really arrive and really discover what that means together, and explore what that means together, and open up the back of the body, open up movement, open up the bottoms of the feet. I have an acupuncture mat that's got, it's got like 108 little sewn in spiky things. And you stand, I will have clients, as they're willing, of course, this is their choice, but the invitation is to stand on that and start to open up the bottoms of the feet. And that stimulus trickles up, right? So the brain becomes more on board, the circulation of the body, so much more presence starts to happen. And I like to arrive into that space before we start working. I find that people get a lot further faster, so to speak.
Yeah, that makes so much sense what you're saying. I'm thinking about now about a 50-minute session, how, we're checking in and then we're rushing into processing, and then we have to leave time at the end of, of the session for closing the session, especially if there's, intense emotions coming up or some intense memories. That takes a long time, and before we know it, the session is over, and then 15 minutes later the client is in their office checking email, or whatever they're doing back to live. And that model really allows people to take time and process, and then reflect on the processing. So that all really makes sense. I wanted to ask you more specifically about one of the things that you use, and you call it EMDR on your feet, and you also have a technique that you call RDI on your feet. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, that's great. I feel that in my experience as an EMDR clinician, and as a clinician in general, but specifically the EMDR work, I feel like resourcing is a huge part of the healing process. I worked with a client recently who's one of his children went to a rehab facility, and the first thing they took was a family tree, but the family tree was all of the bad stuff, like addictions, mental illness, all of sort of the challenges that family went through. And I said, did they also take a family tree of all the strengths and all the health? And I feel like resource RDI, resource development installation, that resourcing, that is that's the elixir of life. Like that's the strength that carries people through the difficulty. And when we lift that up, and especially, through the more embodying those resources, then there's a deeper cellular awareness of the good stuff, of the strength. We would call
Mm-hmm.
that strength-based treatment, right?
Right.
So, and having a client identify the RDI, we could sit and have them talk about it, but I have them stand up and embody it, inhabit it, move it. You know, I've got the little buzzers in their hands while they're feeling into it, talking it through, bringing up a recent memory of embodying that, and having them stay with that. That I find so much generativity, so much generosity, so much that's generative opens up. And that's actually the river we flow on, through the work, always coming back to that and allowing that to be the source of the work.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense, both for the RDI and for processing. I know that, many of us process, traumas and disturbing memories while clients are sitting, and there's so much that is going on in the body. And
Mhm.
what we're doing when they're just sitting, we're not letting them release that
Yeah.
trauma that is stuck in the body. So I think it
Mm.
it does make sense, both for the RDI, both for the resourcing and for the EMDR processing itself. Is that something that you do as well? The processing itself, do you do
The
it
re
while they're in movement, or while they're standing up?
the reprocessing, it kind of depends on the person's energy level. It depends, I think the RDI step, we do a lot of movement and embodiment, like I just shared. Commonly, that we sort of speed up to slow down. So what
Mm,
I find is it's more of a leading into the reprocessing. And then commonly what I find is people actually want to be more still when they're, in like a trauma memory. They want to be kind of more in the visual landscape and a little bit deeper in their psyche in that way. But when we talk more about EMDR on your feet in the next episode, I'll go more into kind of what I've seen, how I've seen being on your feet through the reprocessing can be useful as well. Um, the one other thing I want to say about the resourcing, when I have clients stand and embody that resource and then pull up a recent memory and do the bilateral work, the other thing that I love is that that inhabiting, the inhabiting of the positive, so to speak, the inhabiting, I mean, they're accessing the AIP, first of all, right?
yeah.
and and they're accessing all of this intelligence that is coursing through them that they don't usually associate with trauma. They think, oh, I'm going to come in and work on my trauma and it's going to be awful, right? I'm not really wanting to, it's going to be dark, it's going to be heavy, it's going to be loaded. And to focus so much on the resourcing really lifts people up. I commonly find that people say two things. One, Rebecca, this is really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like to realize that therapy could be fun, and not fun for fun's sake, but to realize that the healing adventure is life-giving. It like generates energy, which we can experience as fun. The other thing is they walk out of my office, they literally walk out the door with more of that strength available. And they've been up on their feet. I have them picture, when's the next time you're going to need this, right? So the future template comes in. They imagine themselves in the kitchen and their son calling and him kind of being a grump, and that they've got this new way of responding that they've just practiced several times, and they've visualized doing it in their setting. And then next time they come back, I'm like, how did that go? I was way more able to stay with how I wanted things to go versus how they usually go.
Yeah, so EMDR on your feet plus future template. That
For
sounds like a good
sure.
good combination. Rebecca, one more question I have I want to ask you, and this is something I ask every person I interview. And the question is, how do we get better? How do EMDR therapists get better at being EMDR therapists?
Hmm. Hmm. We talked about this a little bit, and I was sharing with you the faculty of listening, the art of listening, the art and science of listening, I feel is so central to what we do. And clinicians have a very, we're trained to listen. And I think that looking for what delights you in the other person is a helpful way of listening. And I feel like it's combination of listening, but listening with curiosity, listening um, for that thread of aliveness or delightfulness. And I feel that that kind of listening and then being able to mirror that back to reflect that, such a gift, right? It's such a gift to our clients to be able to appreciate them in a natural way, enjoy them. That's often a lot of the healing, right? That right there is for someone to feel cherished or delighted in, and then to be seen, in that in what those strengths are. So yeah, finding, I think EMDR clinicians, we can all continue to deepen by finding what is our particular way of listening, what are the gifts that our listening actually brings forth or lifts up, and then even deepen in that play in that territory even more.
Yeah, so the art and science of listening.
Mm.
Rebecca Strong, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hmm. You're so welcome. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to, I'm welcoming clinicians to come do EMDR intensives with me. Um, I love serving people who serve people, and to take a golden pause, a sacred pause for yourself, and to clean up the past in order to shine into the future. I'd love to support people in that way. So,
Absolutely. And we know that, we therapists need to do our own work, and, we absorb a lot of what we do
mm,
by listening to our clients and being present with our clients. So,
yes.
yeah, definitely. So, Rebecca, you have a retreat specific for EMDR therapists. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I have a retreat for professionals. It's a 3.5 day retreat, and right now we're figuring out, is this going to be at a distance in person or um, remote? But 3.5 days seems to be a real, really potent amount of time where you get kind of far enough away from the shore of your current overwhelm and situation, and then some time to really deepen. We usually take 1 to 2 things that are kind of looping or causing the most distress, either past or current, and really spend time cleaning those up with a lot of bilateral work, as well as writing, as well as a little bit of time out on the land, and movement practices. And then the third day, we really harvest. We kind of complete the deeper process and then start preparing for the future, taking those new insights into your life going forward. So
That sounds wonderful. Rebecca, thank you again
you're
so much.
welcome, Rotem. Thank you.